Hello all, welcome back to Classic Spin. Today I have another installment in the A.E. Burns Council of Nicaea series. I believe this is part 14. This is a very interesting segment of the book in which Burns says that he doesn't consider the Creed of Constantinople to be a, quote, revision of the First Nicene Creed. This is also a very interesting episode insofar as it engages with some of the things I've talked about before when it comes to how the Church viewed additions to the creeds. In this section, Burns actually talks about the Council of Toledo in 589. Anyway, I'll get the audiobook playing right now and you all can listen and make your own decision. There is a much more serious question which must be faced at this point. What is the precise meaning of homoousios in a creed in which the clause of the essence of the Father is not included? It is maintained that though homoousios triumphed, yet it was accepted in the sense of homoiousios, and much is made of opposition at the Council of Constantinople between what is called the Old Nicene Western and Alexandrian and the New Antiochene, Cappadocian, Asiatic Orthodoxy, though it is admitted that this opposition is only partly known to us. Of old, it is argued, it had been the unity of the Godhead that had stood out plain and clear. The plurality had been a mystery, but after the Council of Alexandria in 362, it was permitted to make the unity the mystery, to start from the plurality, and to reduce the unity to a matter of likeness. That is to say, to interpret homoousios as homoiousios, so changing the substantial unity of being into more likeness of being, and so instead of one Godhead, existing permanently, eternally, in three distinct forms or spheres of existence, there would be three forms of existence, of like nature with one another, which together make up the Godhead. Such, it is said, was the Catholic faith as held by the leaders of the Church in the East and in the West, though more particularly in the East, at the end of the Arian controversy. The first suggestion of this interpretation came from Zahn. It was followed by Harnack and Loofs. It involves a thorough scrutiny of the teaching of new leaders of thought in Cappadocia, Basil and the Gregories of Nazianzus and Nyssa, for which I must refer to the pages of Bethune-Baker and an article by Srawley, who concludes that this theory appears to have gained ground from the weight of the authorities by which it is supported, rather than from its intrinsic merits. Watkins' tempting epigram may be rejected. Surely Athanasius would have had an anathema for the men who left out the all-important from the essence. As Professor Bethune-Baker writes, it might be permitted to doubt whether Athanasius was quite so ready with anathemas, but in any case, we shall all be agreed that least of all men would he have contended for a gloss if once it was clear that the sense for which he had fought was accepted. And years before he had made it as clear as day that he valued this all-important phrase because it prohibited the Arian interpretation of from God. In the phrase of the Creed, from the essence ousia of the Father, there can be no doubt that ousia means the inmost being of the Father, his very self. The translation substance, which comes to us through the Latin, is not satisfactory. Essence hardly conveys to English ears the real meaning, and nature, though nature is certainly included in the sense, is quite inadequate by itself. Being is the nearest equivalent we have. The phrase is intended to mark the distinct personality of the Son. On the one hand, he is in himself, he has his own existence, while on the other hand, it declares that he has his existence from no source external to the Father, but is of the very being of the Father, and belongs to his being, so that the Father himself is not, does not exist, is not to be conceived of as having being, apart from the Son. So it is that Athanasius, writing an explanation of the proceedings at Nicaea, declares that the Council wrote from the essence of God, rather than simply from God, expressly to mark the unique, unoriginate relationship in which the Son stands to the Father, in view of the sense in which it is true that all things are from God. I think, however, that the importance of this matter may be easily exaggerated. Our Nicene Creed is not to be regarded, from a historical point of view, as a revision of the First Nicene Creed. If it were, I grant that omission of the essence of the Father would be serious, because at the beginning of the struggle, Athanasius laid more stress on it than on homoousios. But in fact, the case is precisely the opposite, so to speak, the sharpening of theological teaching in a baptismal creed, an historic faith, which lacked such a precise term. Its insertion was a vindication of Nicene orthodoxy. Those who had scrupled to use it scrupled no longer. The loyalty of Athanasius, through half a century, had its reward. We may confirm this argument by a quotation in which Athanasius shows that homoousios meets this point. For the precision of this phrase detects their pretense. whenever they use the phrase "from God," and gets rid of all the subtleties with which they seduce the simple. For whereas they contrive to put a sophistical construction on all other words at their will, this phrase only, as detecting their heresy, do they dread, which the Fathers set down as a bulwark against their irreligious notions, one and all. We have traced the revised creed from its original home in Jerusalem to its adopted home in Constantinople. Yet another chapter in its romantic history is opened. It had been, in ante-Nicene times, an instruction for catechumens. In the 4th century, it became also a guarantee of orthodoxy. It next became the doxology of the faith in the liturgy. To this position, as Turner has well said, no other form of creed ever aspired than that of Constantinople. Alike in the Greek, the Latin, and even the Coptic churches, its majestic rhythm and its definite but simple and straightforward theology have marked it out as the creed of Christian worship. Theodore the Reader, in his church history, about AD 520, tells us that Peter the Fuller, Monophysite Patriarch of Antioch from AD 476 to 488, devised the saying of the creed at every service, and again, that Timothy of Constantinople, AD 512 to 517, another Monophysite, ordered that the symbol of the faith of the 318 Fathers should be said at every service, as an insinuation that Macedonius, his Orthodox predecessor, did not accept the creed, for it had formerly been said only once a year, on the occasion of the catechetical instructions given by the bishop on Good Friday. Reading between the lines, we can see that the Monophysites, who taught the doctrine of one nature in the one Christ, used the creed in this way, as a protest against the definition of faith of the Council of Chalcedon. And when Theodore speaks of the creed of the 318 Fathers, there can be little doubt that he is speaking of C, regarded as an improved recension of N. He identifies it with the baptismal creed of Constantinople, and no trace of N has been found in the liturgies. Thus, the liturgical creed was called by the name Nicene. In the 7th century, Isidore of Seville fell into the same mistake. The creed which is proclaimed by the people at the time of the sacrifice was edited at the Nicene Synod by the collating of the 318 Holy Fathers. That he means C is proved by its use in the Spanish liturgy from the Council of Toledo in AD 589. The curious thing is that this council does not confuse the forms, nor did it, as is so often asserted, insert the words "and the Son" after "proceedeth from the Father." At this memorable council, King Recared, with all his bishops and chief counselors, abjured the heresy of Arianism, which had been hereditary among the Visigoths, accepting the definition of Chalcedon. At his advice, the bishops, meeting in synod, ordered that in all the churches of Spain and Galicia, following the form of the Oriental churches, the symbol of the faith of the Council of Constantinople, that is, of the 150 bishops, shall be recited, so that before the Lord's Prayer is said, the creed shall be chanted, with a clear voice, by the people, that testimony may thus be borne to the true faith, and that the hearts of the people may come purified by the faith to taste the body and blood of Christ.